The afternoon rain poured down on Manhattan like the sky had lost its temper. On Fifth Avenue, each raindrop hit the tiled roof of St. Helena's Church, echoing like the solemn toll of a funeral bell. Inside, candle flames flickered behind stained glass, casting kaleidoscopic reflections across the white silk of Emily Hernandez's wedding gown. She stood at the altar, clutching her bouquet of lilies so tightly that the petals had gone limp. Her late grandmother's vintage dress clung damply to her skin, heavy with sweat and humidity. No one knew that at the holiest moment of her life, Emily's heart was screaming to run. Before her stood Marcus Wellington, her fiancé heir to Wellington Financial Group, immaculate in a black tailored tuxedo, his icy blue eyes so void of warmth they froze the air itself. He didn't look at her like a man gazing at his bride. He looked at her like a transaction sealed with silk and gold. To have and to hold. Marcus's voice rang out, each word slicing through the air like a blade. Emily trembled. From the front pew came the murmur of guests, men in gray suits with gold rings and eyes that gleamed with greed rather than goodwill. They weren't here to celebrate love. They were here to witness a business deal cloaked in white lace. 3 months earlier, Emily had been a modest art teacher in Brooklyn, living in a decaying apartment and drowning in medical debt after her grandmother's death. When Marcus Wellington, one of her art patrons, had taken an interest in her, she'd thought fate had finally smiled her way. He had charm, sophistication, the kind of confidence that made her believe he could rescue her from her gray, crumbling world. And she, naive, broke desperate, had believed every word he said. But behind his vows, she was nothing more than a breathing contract. As the priest's voice rose for the final blessing, a low whisper cut through the rumble of thunder outside. It came not from the congregation, but from Marcus himself. After the honeymoon, it'll all be finalized, he murmured, leaning toward his best man. She'll never know about the offshore accounts. Or the other deals. Emily's breath caught. She didn't know what hurt more, the venom in his words, or the gentle smile he kept plastered on his face as he turned toward her, pretending nothing had happened. Offshore accounts. Other deals. Each word sank into her mind like a needle. She realized then something far darker than betrayal was unfolding. Marcus wasn't just marrying her. He was using her. Maybe for her grandmother's forgotten inheritance, or something else she didn't even know she possessed. If anyone objects to this union, the priest intoned solemnly, "Speak now or forever hold your peace." Silence. Only the rain hammered the stained glass windows, and Emily's pulse thundered in her ears. Marcus squeezed her hand, his grip bruising the antique ring from her grandmother, digging into her skin. "Emily," he whispered, "don't forget you owe me, and debts must be paid." She looked up, and for the first time she didn't see Marcus's face. She saw the face of the devil. Taking a trembling breath, she whispered, "Object." Marcus's head snapped toward her. "What did you say?" Emily's voice rose steady this time. "I said I object to this marriage." Gasps rippled through the church. The elite turned in their seats, whispering behind manicured hands. Someone muttered, "My God." Marcus forced a smile, his hand clamping around her wrist. "What are you doing, Emily?" "The right thing," she stammered, and before she could think, she ran. Her heels struck the marble floor, echoing like war drums announcing her rebellion. Outside, Manhattan was drowning in rain. Emily bolted down the church steps. Her breath-ragged black hair soaked the hem of her gown, smeared with mud. Her heels slipped on the slick pavement, but she didn't stop. Behind her, Marcus's voice roared over the thunder. "You'll regret this, Emily. No one walks away from me." She didn't look back. All she knew was that she had to escape him. The church, this whole deceitful city that had swallowed her dreams. Her phone and wallet were still in the dressing room. She had nothing left. No money, no plan, no future, only fear. A flash of lightning illuminated the street. Under a flickering street lamp, she saw a black Maserati Quattroporte, its engine idling softly. Without hesitation, Emily flung open the rear door and collapsed onto the cold leather seat. The air inside smelled of leather-expensive cologne and something darker like danger. "Jesus Christ!" A low, husky voice came from the driver's seat. "You just jumped into my car in the middle of a storm." Emily looked up. The glow from a phone screen lit his face. Christian Lewis. A sharp jawline, wet black hair, eyes the color of a gathering storm. He didn't seem startled, just slightly amused, his voice calm and commanding. "Lady, this isn't a taxi. Please," she gasped. "Just drive. I'll pay you anything, drive." Christian studied her through the rearview mirror, a drenched bride mascara. Running, trembling hands clutching her ruined dress. "You just ran away from your wedding." She didn't answer, only nodded. "Someone chasing you?" "My fiancé," she whispered bitterly. "If I can still call him that." Christian chuckled softly, a dangerous velvety sound. "You might have picked the wrong man to ask for help." "I don't care," she said, staring out the rain-smeared window, "as long as you don't take me back." He paused. Then, without another word, he shifted gears and hit the accelerator. The Maserati sliced through the storm like a shadow fleeing the light. Manhattan faded behind them. City lights melted into streaks of gold and gray across the rearview mirror. Emily curled into herself, shivering in her soaked dress. Christian glanced at her once before asking, "What's your name, Emily?" she murmured. "And the man, Marcus Wellington." He froze for a split second. "Wellington." His tone changed slower, darker. "Now that's a familiar name." But Emily didn't notice. She thought of her grandmother, the tiny Brooklyn apartment, and the old butterfly painting hanging above the mantel. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. There are things, Emily, too precious to tell anyone about, not even the ones you love. Back then, it had sounded like a fable. Now it felt like prophecy. The Maserati turned onto the eastern highway. The rain thinned to a drizzle, revealing a dim silver sky. Christian switched on the radio. Slow jazz filled the car like a heartbeat. "Do you have no idea how deep the Wellington scandals go?" he asked, voice steady. "I don't know and I don't want to," she replied, eyes on the window. "You should," he said, "because they're not just after you, they're after what you have." Emily turned sharply. "I don't have anything." Christian smirked. "Are you sure sometimes people hold things they don't even know they possess, until others are willing to kill for them?" The words sent ice through her veins. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Someone you weren't supposed to meet," he replied. "But fate rarely asks permission." He glanced at his watch, murmuring almost to himself. "Wellington. What a cruel coincidence." They pulled up to a gated estate outside New Jersey. The iron gates opened automatically, flanked by towering pines. Warm yellow lights shimmered on the rain-soaked driveway. "We're here," Christian said. "I can't stay," Emily blurted. "You have to let me go." "If I do," he interrupted calmly, "Marcus will find you in half an hour. If you want to live, trust me." The gates clanged shut behind them. Emily felt her stomach twist. It felt less like a sanctuary and more like a cage. Inside the mansion exuded a suffocating elegance. Old paintings lined the walls, each framed with an engraved L. The golden light glinted off the whiskey in Christian's hand, reflecting the storm-gray cold of his eyes. He sat in a leather chair while she stood by the fireplace, the flames doing little to ease her trembling. "Aren't you curious who I am?" Christian asked with a faint smile. "Who are you?" Her voice cracked. "Christian Lewis." Emily froze. She knew that name. Everyone in New York's financial world did. The ghost of Wall Street. An Italian-American billionaire, the man behind secret takeovers, whispered to be untouchable and deadly. "I don't know why you picked my car," he said, raising his glass. But the universe played a callous joke. Emily's voice shook. "I didn't mean to. I just ran. Ran from Wellington and straight into Lewis." He chuckled, "Quite the choice, Miss Hernandez." She stiffened. "You know my name. I know more than you think." He set down his glass, his gaze sharp as a blade. "The Wellingtons have been watching you for months. Now I need to know why." Emily backed away until her shoulders hit the wall. "I don't know anything." Christian stood and walked toward her. Each step slow, deliberate. "You can tell me the truth now," he said quietly, "or let Marcus find you. And trust me, he won't stop at taking the documents." Emily trembled, but her eyes burned with defiance. "I have nothing left to lose, Christian." He studied her for a long moment. In his storm-gray eyes, she saw something unexpected. Not just coldness, but a flicker of pity. Maybe even curiosity. "Wrong," he said softly. "You've lost everything. That means you have the rarest thing left a chance to start over." Outside, rain began to fall again. Each drop tapped against the window, like a quiet reminder that Emily's old life had ended when she said, "I object." A new story begins inside that mansion with the most dangerous man in New York. One that would rewrite everything she thought she knew about love survival and truth. "Rest," Christian said, turning away. "Tomorrow I'll show you why Wellington really wanted to marry you." Emily said nothing. She stared out the window, watching the rain blur the night into gray and gold. Deep inside, she knew this wasn't just an escape, but the beginning of a war. A war between two worlds where love and danger would soon become indistinguishable. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. The next morning, pale sunlight filtered through the gray velvet curtains, tracing soft lines across the lavish room where Emily Hernandez never imagined she would wake up. The faint aroma of Arabica coffee mingled with the woody scent of oak from the fireplace, wrapping the air in a kind of still luxury. The room was so vast that even her breath echoed back to her. Oil paintings adorned the walls, each an heirloom of art and authority. On the mahogany table sat a steaming cup of espresso, a neatly folded white shirt, and a handwritten note. "Get dressed. Come downstairs. We need to talk. CL." The handwriting was sharp, slanted, and deliberate, just like the man himself. Emily's chest tightened as she held the note. Everything had happened too fast, from a ruined wedding to waking up as an uninvited guest in the mansion of Christian Lewis. The man whose very name struck fear in New York's most powerful circles. She put on the shirt he had left for her. The fabric was soft, carrying the faint scent of sandalwood. As she descended the sweeping marble staircase, she found him waiting at the bar. Christian sat casually, sleeves rolled to his elbows, the top buttons of his black shirt undone, revealing a thin scar across his collarbone one. The morning light made hauntingly vivid. Neither spoke at first. Only their eyes met his gaze, cold, steady, but unnervingly deep. "Did you sleep well?" Christian's voice was low and rough, like velvet laced with steel. No one could sleep well locked inside a stranger's mansion. He gave a faint, amused smile. "If I wanted to keep you prisoner, you wouldn't have slept in that room. Only people I trust get to cross that door." "Trust?" Emily gave a soft, bitter laugh. "You've known me for what, 2 hours?" Christian tilted his head slightly, his gray eyes studying her like he was weighing whether to tell the truth or keep it hidden. "My instincts have never been wrong," he said at last. "You don't strike me as someone who knows how to fake it." "And what about you?" she asked quietly. "Are you pretending?" "Christian?" For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a low, rich sound that eased the tension, yet made her even more wary. "If I said yes, would that make you fear me more? Or intrigue you more?" Emily said nothing. She looked down at her hand, at the faint red mark where her wedding ring had been just yesterday. Christian poured coffee and slid a cup toward her. "Marcus Wellington," he began, "is the kind of man you should never have crossed paths with. But fate has a twisted sense of humor. You know him. I know everyone in this city who plays with power and money," he replied evenly. "Wellington Financial is a monster built on debt and dirty contracts. He was marrying you to finalize a deal." Emily stared at him, her voice trembling. "You know I'm just a teacher. I don't have anything." Christian leaned back, his eyes dissecting her every reaction. "You're holding an inheritance you don't even know exists. It could be property, it could be evidence. I intend to find out. You sound like you're gaining something out of this too." "Of course," he said, taking a slow sip of espresso. "Marcus tried to hijack one of my projects through offshore accounts. The name Hernandez appeared in the documents. When I discovered you were his fiancée, I realized Wellington was hiding something bigger. And you, Emily, you're the key." Emily went still. The cruel coincidence of her heartbreak and their schemes made her feel so small it was almost laughable. She whispered, "I don't want to be part of this. I want my life back." Christian set down his cup. His expression softened. "I believe you. But Wellington won't stop. And trust me, if he wants something, the justice system will bend to his will. His voice carried quiet conviction. She didn't doubt for a second that he had seen the ugliest parts of the world up close. An older man entered the room. Silver-haired, upright, with eyes sharp as glass. "This is Roberto," Christian said. "My housekeeper. He'll make sure you're safe here." Roberto nodded slightly, his tone calm but alert. "Sir Wellington's men have been searching around Manhattan. I've ordered the security system to switch to encrypted mode." Christian nodded. "Good, and my people in Boston." "They're monitoring Wellington Group's accounts. It looks like he's pulling funds from his foreign investments." Christian's brow arched. "He's preparing to disappear. But before he does, he needs your signature, Emily." "Do you remember signing anything?" She frowned. "Nothing, just the marriage papers." "No," Christian said slowly. "He didn't need a wife, he needed your signature, probably on a forged contract. Wellington has used that trick before to seize company shares." Her head spun. Suddenly, everything made sense. His rush to marry her, the legal papers his lawyer insisted she sign for formality. It had all been a cover for something far more sinister. She rose to her feet, trembling. He planned it from the start. Christian didn't answer. He just watched her. Something in his gaze made her feel stripped bare, yet oddly understood. That afternoon, light rain began to fall again. Christian took her for a walk in the garden behind the mansion. It didn't look like the lair of a dangerous man. The stone paths were lined with roses, pruned to perfection, and white swans glided across a small pond. Without meaning to, she said softly, "You're not like the man people say you are, and you." Christian replied, narrowing his eyes slightly, "Are everything I didn't expect." Meaning. A woman who would jump into a stranger's car in the middle of a storm and still look at him like she's daring fate itself. Emily laughed. "I didn't have anything left to lose." "That's where you're wrong," he said in a low voice. "People who think they've lost everything, they're the most dangerous." The words stopped her cold. Dangerous not because of what she could do, but because she could make men like him lose control. When they returned, Christian invited her into the library. The room spanned almost an entire floor, its walls lined with books. Warm amber light from brass lamps bathed everything in a glow of intellect and loneliness. "Do you read?" he asked. "I teach art, but I love poetry." "Poetry?" He tilted his head. "Interesting." He pulled a slim book from the shelf and handed it to her. "Pablo Neruda. I read this when my father died. He understood love. And loss." Emily flipped through the pages, her voice soft as she read aloud. "Love doesn't always come to save you. Sometimes it comes to burn you into someone else entirely." Christian's eyes lingered on her face. "Do you believe that I think—" "I'm starting to." She closed the book gently and set it on the table. In that quiet moment, something shifted, an invisible thread forming between two broken souls, fragile yet unmistakable. Later that night, Emily heard piano music drifting up from downstairs. The sound was slow, mournful, and filled with a longing she couldn't name. She descended the staircase and found Christian seated at a grand black piano, his fingers moving with deliberate grace. The light caught his features cold, yet strangely gentle. When the music ended, he didn't turn around. He said, "Are you going to keep hiding upstairs, or ask me why I can play? I didn't want to interrupt." "You're not interrupting," he said softly. "Music is the only thing that keeps me from becoming the man I hate." "And what kind of man is that, a killer?" Emily froze. He lifted his head, eyes unflinching. "When my father died, I was 17. They planted a bomb in his car. I found out who did it. And I made them pay. Since then, they've called me the heir of the Lewis Empire." She stood silently, unsure how to respond. "I'm not telling you this for pity," he continued. "I want you to understand I've done terrible things, but not all sins are born of malice." "I don't think you're an evil man," she whispered. "You shouldn't think that," he replied with a faint, bitter smile. "I'm not the kind of man you should trust." "Maybe," she said calmly, "but I don't have anyone else to trust." That stopped him. He stared at her for a long time, as if searching her eyes for a reason not to destroy what little good remained in him. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Emily stepped out onto the balcony. Silver moonlight draped the garden below the city lights of New York, flickering faintly beyond the rain, a ghost of her former life. In the pocket of Christian's shirt, she found an old photograph Christian with a middle-aged man and a little blonde girl. On the back, a handwritten line read, "Family is not who you're born with, it's who you protect." She understood then, beneath that armor of control and danger, he carried a wound that had never healed. Perhaps loss, perhaps guilt. She whispered to the night, "Maybe we're both running Christian. Except I run with my feet, and you run with your heart." The next morning he was gone. Only an envelope remained on the desk. "I have business in Boston. Don't leave the house. Don't open the door for anyone." See. She opened the window. Cold air rushed in carrying the scent of rain and sea. Seagulls cut across the pale gray sky. At that moment, Emily realized she had already crossed a line too far from her old world to return. And no matter how dangerous the man with the storm eyes was the only person who had made her feel safe in this city of lies. Elsewhere in a penthouse overlooking Manhattan, Marcus Wellington set down his cup of coffee, lips curling into a thin smile. "Have you found her yet?" he asked lazily. The man in the black suit bowed his head. "No, sir. But there are reports she was seen near Christian Lewis's estate." Marcus's smile sharpened like glass. "Good. Let him think he has the upper hand. When Lewis protects a woman, he exposes his only weakness." He twisted the ring on his finger, its metallic glint slicing through the dim light cold and lethal. She thinks she's escaped, but the game has only begun. In the cold morning breeze, Emily stood by the mansion window, gazing at the mist-covered garden. She didn't know that far beyond the trees, a camera lens was trained on her, tracking her every move, every breath. A gravelly voice came through a radio transmitter target in sight. Awaiting orders. Between two worlds, one haunted by vengeance, the other by betrayal. Fate was weaving invisible threads, pulling them both into a storm neither could escape. And at the heart of that storm, love was beginning to bloom, fragile, dangerous, and so blindingly alive that both would soon forget. Some truths cannot be healed by love, only revealed by the coming reckoning. Monday morning passed in an unsettling silence. The pale New Jersey sunlight filtered through the old oak trees outside the window, glinting faintly across Emily Hernandez's face as she sat quietly at the desk. In front of her lay the envelope Christian Lewis had left behind. It had been more than 24 hours since he disappeared. No messages, no calls. Only a single warning: don't leave the house. Emily looked out at the garden. Everything was too still, so quiet she could hear the antique clock ticking on the wall. The calm was almost suffocating, more unnerving than the sound of gunfire. She opened the envelope. Inside was a printed image taken from a security camera the moment she ran from the church in her soaked wedding gown. In the corner, a note was scribbled in pencil. "The photo's been leaked. Wellington is tracking you. Don't trust anyone but me." Emily's grip tightened around the paper. Her heart clenched painfully. Part of her wanted to trust Christian. Yet another part trembled with fear he knew too much too soon about her, and things she didn't even understand herself. When the clock struck 10, a knock came at the door. She jumped. The elderly butler, Roberto, appeared, his face as calm as ever. "Miss Hernandez, Mr. Lewis sent a car for you. He asks that you come to the East Wing Library. There's someone you need to meet. He's back." "Not yet, but he gave instructions in advance." Emily hesitated. The sky outside was dimming, clouds gathering like bruises. Her instincts screamed for her to stay put, but curiosity burned stronger. She nodded. The black Bentley drove her away from the main mansion through a narrow, tree-lined road leading to a smaller white stone building, elegant and solitary, a private library rather than a residence. Inside, the air was cool and heavy with the scent of old books. Wooden shelves towered around her, packed with files, ledgers, and leather-bound volumes. The man waiting for her was not Christian. He was around 50 with silver-streaked hair, a dark suit, and piercing blue eyes too familiar. They were the same cold shade as Marcus Wellington's. When he spoke, his voice sent a chill down her spine. "You must be Emily Hernandez." "Who are you?" she asked, stepping back. Edward Wellington, Marcus's father. Her breath caught. Edward smiled faintly. Don't be afraid, my dear. I didn't come to harm you. I came to help you. Before my son does something unforgivable. I don't believe you. Of course you don't. You trust no one. But Christian Lewis has been keeping you, hasn't he? Emily froze. I don't know what he is to all of this. Lewis used to work with me, Edward said slowly, his sharp eyes studying her. Before he decided he was some hero. He told me the Wellingtons were using me to get some documents. Edward gave a dry, amused laugh. My son's not smart enough to see the whole picture. But Lewis, he is. He wants you to think you're a victim so that he can use you for his own ends. And what ends are those to destroy the Wellington group? His tone was calm, but hatred flickered behind his eyes. You think a man like Lewis ever does anything without personal gain? He's Dominic Lewis's son, my greatest rival 20 years ago. His father died in a car explosion. And who do you think was blamed for it, Marcus? Emily's pulse stopped cold. You're saying Marcus didn't kill Christian's father? Edward's smile was weary, cynical. Who knows? In this world, truth belongs to the one who writes it. The words pierced her like a fine, sharp blade. Why are you telling me this? To warn you, Edward said softly. You're trapped between two forces that know no mercy. If you're wise, you'll leave before Lewis makes you pay for your faith in him. Emily said nothing, but a chill crawled down her spine. Edward stepped closer, slipping a small USB drive into her palm. This holds the answers you want. If you genuinely wish to know who killed your parents, watch it, but don't let Lewis find out. He won't let you live once you know too much. When she returned to the mansion, her mind was in chaos. Rain began to patter against the car windows. She clutched at the USB as if it might explode in her hand. She didn't know what to believe anymore, Edward's warning or Christian's silence. When she stepped inside, Christian was already waiting in the hall. His shirt was wet and there was blood smeared on his wrist. He looked like he had just come from a battlefield. Where did you go? His voice was low, quiet, but it froze the air around them. You sent a car for me. They said you wanted to see me. Christian's expression hardened. I didn't send anyone. The air seemed to collapse. Emily's body went still. Who did you meet? A man who said he was Marcus's father. Christian's eyes darkened, storm brewing in their depths. He stepped closer, gripping her chin, not roughly but with unyielding force. What did he tell you that you're using me? That your father died because of Marcus, and that you want revenge? Christian released her, stepping back with a bitter laugh that held no trace of joy. Edward Wellington. Even at death's door, he still knows how to poison the truth. So, is it true? He looked at her, and for a moment his gray eyes reflected a past carved in pain. My father died in a car explosion. The man who ordered it was Edward Wellington. But he had enough power to make the world believe Marcus was innocent. I've waited years for my chance to tip the board back. So you are using me? No. His voice softened, deepened. You walked in by chance. But maybe fate sent you to show me what I couldn't see, that Wellington is still killing people, and you're just his latest victim. She took a step back, eyes never leaving his. You're saying I'm dead while I'm still standing here. Marcus doesn't need to kill you. He only requires your signature to transfer your father's shares into his name. Emily froze. She had never told him that her father once worked as an engineer for Wellington Corporation. How did he know you investigated me? I investigated everyone linked to Wellington, and he replied evenly. I knew you didn't belong in that world when I saw your name. He moved closer, voice lowering like silk cutting through the air. Your father discovered that Wellington was laundering money through construction projects. He hid the evidence somewhere. When he died, they believed you might know where it was, so Marcus got close to you. You can't possibly know that for sure. I can, Christian said, pulling a thick folder from a drawer. He laid it open on the table. Photographs spilled out, her father standing with other Wellington engineers. Marcus meeting a stranger in a dim bar, blueprints stamped Hernandez, draft copy. Emily's hands trembled as she touched one page. This is my father's handwriting. Yes, and the original files had one mark at the bottom, Butterfly 42. Butterfly. she whispered. "That's my grandmother's painting. I still have it." Christian's eyes widened slightly. Then that's where he hid it. By evening, the rain had grown heavier. Christian called his security team and ordered a car. "We're going to Brooklyn." "No, you don't understand. My house was sealed after my grandmother died." "I can't. If your father hid the evidence there, Wellington will find it before we do." His tone left no room for argument. She nodded reluctantly. Through the storm, the city blurred past the windows like an old film reel. Gray buildings, rain-soaked streets, and ghosts of memories flickering through her mind. "Have you been here before?" she asked as they turned onto Atlantic Avenue. "Yes," Christian replied, without looking away from the window. "My father once had an office near the Brooklyn dockyard. Not far from your house. That's also where the explosion happened." There was something in his voice, not rage but sorrow buried deep. "If you genuinely believe Marcus killed your father, why not go to the police? Because justice doesn't exist in buildings with Wellington carved on the door." His words silenced her. The old house stood behind a line of nearly bare maple trees. The wooden door was half open. Inside, the air smelled of lavender and incense, the scent of her childhood. Christian switched on a flashlight, scanning the walls and furniture. "Where's the butterfly painting?" Emily stepped into her grandmother's bedroom. There it was, hanging on the wall, an oil painting of a butterfly perched on lavender. The frame faded with time. Her fingers brushed the edge, trembling. Grandma used to say this painting kept her most important secrets. I thought she meant memories. Christian pulled a small knife from his jacket and carefully pried open the back of the frame. The wood gave way with a soft crack, revealing a sealed envelope bound with red wax. Emily's heart pounded as she took it. The flashlight gleamed over the handwritten note, for Emily. "When the butterflies stop flying." "That's my father's handwriting," she whispered, her voice breaking. Christian nodded and opened it gently. Inside was a small memory card and several faded photocopied pages. He slid the card into his laptop. The screen lit up. Files appeared, blueprints of underground projects, lists of offshore accounts, shell company names, and the digital signature of Edward Wellington. "Oh my God," Emily murmured. "My father found them." Christian's eyes darkened. "And they killed him for it." Then a noise outside. Both froze. Christian drew his gun, motioning for silence. He crept to the window and lifted the curtain. Headlights flashed in the rain. Someone was out there. "They've found us," he said under his breath. "Move." He grabbed her hand and led her to the back door. But the growl of engines came closer, too close. In the rain, figures emerged, men in black coats, moving like shadows. "Christian?" Emily whispered, shaking. "Who are they?" "Not mine, Wellington's." He shoved her into a car parked behind the house and started the engine. Tires screeched, water splashing as they sped into the night. As they left Brooklyn, Emily looked back through the window. Flames swallowed the old house. A small explosion bloomed, destroying everything. "No," she choked out. Christian's jaw tightened, hands gripping the wheel. "They're erasing evidence, but at least now we have something they can't destroy." He glanced at her, his eyes steady, fierce. "From now on, Emily, you're not just a witness. You are the evidence." The rain grew heavier. Streetlights flashed across his face, sharp. Focused, but beneath that steel, she saw something else, fear. Emily clutched the folder to her chest, turning to him. "Aren't you afraid?" "Of course I am," he said softly, "but I'm more afraid of leaving you alone." Their eyes met, silent, deep, infinite. Outside, the city faded into a blur of gold and gray. Only the rain and their breathing filled the darkness as they were drawn deeper into a deadly game where truth was not just power, but punishment. Emily turned to the window. Raindrops streaked down the glass, catching fragments of amber light. She didn't know what waited ahead, only that from this moment on, she was no longer a woman running away. And the man beside her, the one with storm-colored eyes, was no longer a stranger. Together, they had opened a door to a secret neither was ready to face. A secret that could save the truth, or destroy them both before they ever had the chance to speak it. The Manhattan night sky was murky, the city lights scattering streaks of amber and gold across the glass towers. From afar, the skyline looked like a colossal mirror, reflecting the glow of lost souls, people living and running from themselves. Christian Lewis's car rolled to a stop in the underground garage of a building with no sign or name. From the outside, it looked like an abandoned parking lot. But when the steel doors slid open, Emily saw a high-tech command center hidden within. Satellite maps glowed on wide screens. Data streams ran in endless loops, and the air was filled with the clicking of keyboards and the static of radio chatter. She looked around astonished. "What is this place?" Christian glanced at her, removing his long coat and revealing a bandage wrapped tightly around his arm. "Not mine," he said. "It's the only neutral ground left in this city." Neutral. The people here don't serve Wellington. They don't serve me either. They serve money. He paused, and truth. The way he said the truth made her shiver. He spoke of it as though it were a currency, and clearly he knew its price. A woman stepped out from the surveillance room. She was in her 30s with short black hair and a posture straight as a blade. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. "Mr. Lewis," Ava Christian nodded. "This is Emily Hernandez. I want her under complete protection 24 hours a day." The girl everyone's after Ava smirked, giving Emily a once-over. "She doesn't look like a woman who could start a war." Emily stiffened, but Christian interjected quietly. "She's more important than you think." "Trust me." Ava lifted a brow, but didn't argue. She gestured to one of her team members. "Take her to the guest room." The room was small but spotless, lit by a single window overlooking the city. Beyond the glass, Manhattan glittered like a sky of artificial stars. Emily stood still, overwhelmed. Everything had changed too quickly. Just days ago, she was an art teacher in a beige-painted apartment sipping tea in the mornings, teaching children how to draw butterflies in sunlight. Now she was standing in the middle of a war, fought by people powerful enough to erase her from existence with a single command. On the desk lay a laptop Christian had left for her. Its screen showed the files from her father's USB drive, still decrypting encrypted file 72% complete. She watched the cryptic lines of code scroll by symbols, numbers, fragments of truth she didn't yet understand. But one thing she knew: whatever was inside that drive was worth killing for. The door opened. Christian walked in, his white shirt stained with dried blood, hair damp, a fresh bandage wrapped around his wrist. He set his gun on the table, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and drank it in one gulp. "You're hurt," Emily said, stepping toward him. "It's nothing," he replied, though his breathing betrayed the pain. She caught sight of the bruise along his jawline and felt an ache in her chest. She didn't understand it, why seeing him wounded stirred both fear and tenderness inside her. "Why do they want me dead, Christian?" He lifted his gaze, eyes like cold steel catching light. "Because you're the only one who can expose Wellington's empire. The money laundering, the murders, the manipulation. You're not just a witness, Emily." He paused, voice deepening. "You're the line between their survival and their downfall." She let out a faint, bitter laugh. "Sounds like I'm carrying the weight of the world." "No," he said softly. "Just justice. And I won't let anyone take it from you." Silence stretched between them. Christian sat by the window, city lights cutting his face in half. One side illuminated the other, buried in shadow, like two souls fighting for control. Emily sat across from him, trying to steady her voice. "Edward Wellington told me you once worked for them and were a part of his circle." Christian's eyes closed. His fingers tightened around the glass until his knuckles turned white. "He's right." She froze. "You worked for Wellington." "I worked for the government," he corrected. "But Edward Wellington funded our operations. When I discovered he was using the project to launder money and smuggle weapons, I walked away. My father died soon after." His voice was low, controlled, but the grief beneath it was unmistakable. "They called it a car accident," he said. "I called it murder." Emily looked at him, and for the first time she didn't see the ruthless strategist the world feared. She saw a man haunted an orphaned son, carrying pain like a hidden scar. "From that day," he continued, "I swore I'd make Wellington pay. But I didn't expect you." She swallowed hard. "I don't want to be part of your revenge, Christian." He stood, stepping closer, voice rough but steady. "This isn't revenge. It's survival." He leaned closer until their faces were only inches apart. "If you trust me, I'll take you out of this darkness." She wanted to reply, but his eyes, storm gray and unguarded, silenced her. She only managed a faint nod. A soft chime interrupted the moment. The laptop screen flashed decryption complete. Christian moved to the desk, opening the first file. Images and videos filled the screen. Contracts, bank statements, and internal surveillance footage from Wellington Group. But it was the final clip that made them both stop breathing. A dated video recorded 10 years ago. Her father, Miguel Hernandez, sat in a small office facing Edward Wellington. "I can't sign this, Edward," her father said, voice shaking. "These numbers don't match." "They're fake. Nothing's fake," Miguel Edward replied smoothly. "It's an expansion grant for the Haven Project." "The Haven Project. I've seen the shipping logs. You're hiding something inside those containers." Edward fell silent for a moment, then smiled thinly. "You know too much, Miguel." The screen flickered to black. The recording ended. Emily's hands slipped from the keyboard as tears fell silently. "They killed my father." Christian placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "And now they want to kill his daughter." That night, Christian gathered his team in the central control room. His voice was low, deliberate, cutting through the static. "We have proof of Wellington's weapon smuggling and money laundering. But before we release it, I need the official's name protecting them from inside the government." Ava crossed her arms. "You want me to trace the Haven Blue accounts, sis? Start with the money flow came into DC. That could take 48 hours. You have 24. Ava smirked faintly. "You've changed, Christian. You used to be cold, now you're reckless." He met her eyes calmly. When people have something to lose, recklessness becomes instinct. From the doorway, Emily listened quietly. She realized something had shifted in him. He wasn't fighting just for vengeance anymore, but for something real. For her. Maybe even for redemption. When he stepped out, she asked softly, "If Wellington finds out you have the data, what will they do?" "Kill me. And everyone around me. Then why keep going? Because if I don't, they'll keep killing others." His tone was steady, almost detached, but she saw something raw in his eyes. A man who had stopped caring about his safety long ago. And she hated that she might be why he was walking deeper into the fire. Hours later, Christian fell asleep in his chair. Emily draped a thin blanket over his shoulders. In sleep, his face was stripped of its iron calm, revealing exhaustion, loneliness, and quiet pain. The small scar along his collarbone caught the light, a faint reminder of battles fought in the dark. She brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead and whispered, "If things had been different, maybe you could have been an ordinary man." He stirred, opening his eyes. His hand caught hers. "No," he murmured. "I've never been ordinary." "But you could be," she said softly. "Only when I'm with you." Their eyes met. Not guarded this time, just honest. For one fragile heartbeat, the world outside seemed to hold still. At dawn, Ava burst in her expression tense. "I found it." Christian stood instantly. "Talk." The Haven Blue funds lead to a charity in Washington, the Children's Future Fund. Registered under Emily Hernandez. Emily froze. What Ava projected the data onto the screen bank accounts donation lists, the charity's butterfly logo gleaming in blue. The organization was founded 3 years ago, right after your grandmother's death. Wellington's lawyer filed the paperwork, but it was in your name. Christian's expression darkened. "Did you know about this?" "No," she cried. "I swear I've never heard of it." Ava's voice was sharp. "That's why they need you alive. You're not just a victim, Emily. You're the legal heir to a money laundering network under your own identity." The room went silent. Emily staggered back, holding her head. "They've been using my name? To wash their money?" "Yes," Christian said grimly. "And now to erase the evidence they have to erase you." Tears welled in her eyes. "So I'm the reason my father died. And now I'm putting you in danger too." Christian stepped closer, lifting her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "No, you didn't cause any of this." "They did. They turned you into a weapon without your consent. But I swear, Emily, I'll make them pay for every life they've taken." Outside, the sky turned the color of steel. On the screen, the logo of the Children's Future Fund spun slowly. A blue butterfly spread within a circle of light. Emily stared at it, realization dawning. That symbol. It's the same one on my father's envelope, Butterfly 42. Christian's eyes narrowed. Then your father didn't just leave us evidence. He left you the key. She met his gaze. And maybe that butterfly will lead us to the final truth. In the cold morning light, surrounded by map screens and 1,000 hidden secrets, Emily and Christian stood side by side. Both knew there was no turning back. Their love, if it could be called that, had begun in flight. But now it was becoming the only thing strong enough to keep them alive in a world where every promise came with a price in blood. And as dawn broke through the glass, washing their faces in pale gold, Emily finally understood. Some people don't come into your life to save you from the darkness. They come to walk through it with you. Night cloaked Manhattan in a shade of ash gray, heavy as a curtain, concealing every hidden scheme beneath it. Streetlights flickered across the glass windows, reflecting Emily Hernandez's face, pale, tense, lost in thought. On the table before her, the Children's Future Fund symbol, a blue butterfly mid-flight, rotated slowly on the laptop screen, mocking her with the secret that carried her family's name. Christian Lewis stood beside her. Silent, his storm-gray eyes fixed on the endless rows of code scrolling across the monitor. Each new data line cut deeper into their pasts like a blade opening old scars. Every dollar laundered through Wellington Group was routed through this charity. Under your name, Christian said, his voice low and rough, heavy with fatigue. If we release this now, they'll drag you into the investigation. Victim or not, you'll become part of the crime. Emily turned to him, eyes glistening. Then what do you plan to do? He said. The one thing Wellington fears most is his tone, which is sharp and resolved. We'll turn his secret into our weapon. You want to expose everything. Not yet. He leaned over the table, opening a satellite map. We need to find the source, the origin of the funds. There's a hidden account called Butterfly Node. Your father encrypted it and buried it in the charity system. If we can unlock it, we'll have the evidence to bring down the entire Wellington empire. Emily stared at the tiny butterfly icon pulsing faintly on the glowing map. Part of her wanted it all to end. Another part was terrified because she knew that once the truth came out, she might lose Christian too. The underground hideout was quiet humming, only with the soft rhythm of machines. Ava and the security team had gone to prepare for a remote server breach in Washington. Only Emily and Christian remained surrounded by the ghostly blue light of computer screens. You're not sleeping, she asked, noticing the exhaustion shadowing his face. He murmured, I haven't remembered how to sleep, half joking, half weary. Not since I met you. She smiled faintly, but it faded quickly. Under the flicker of the monitors, he looked less like a man of flesh and more like a figure carved out of darkness, kept alive by willpower and vengeance. Emily walked closer and laid her hand gently on his shoulder. You can't keep carrying the whole world on your back, Christian. You're human too. He turned toward her, his gaze deep and unreadable. I forgot what that feels like. Then remember, she said softly but firmly, because I don't want to love a man who only lives to destroy. Christian froze. Her words pierced through the armor he'd built for years, reaching a place inside him he thought had long turned to stone. He looked at her for a long time, then exhaled, voice barely a whisper. Love. Yes, she said, trembling but steady. Don't think I see it. I feel it in your eyes, in the way you never let me walk alone, even for a moment. You can fool the world, Christian, but not your own heart. He said nothing. Outside, thunder cracked and rain began to fall, painting streaks of silver against the windows. Then Christian stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. His warmth was firm and real, edged with restraint, as if he was afraid to let it linger too long. You don't understand, Emily, he whispered, voice thick. I've done things, terrible things. If you knew, you wouldn't touch me the same way again. She lifted her chin, meeting his eyes without fear. Then tell me. Not so I can forgive you, but so I can walk through it with you. For the first time, Christian felt the impossible urge to believe. By dawn, Ava returned, exhaustion carved into her face, but a sharp glint in her eyes. I found it, she announced. The server that hosts the Butterfly Node is in Red Hook, Brooklyn. It's disguised as one of Wellington's logistics warehouses. Christian's eyes narrowed. Brooklyn again. Everything starts there. Emily's pulse quickened. "Are you sure we should go?" "We have no choice," he said. "If they detect the breach, they'll erase everything." Ava added quietly, "And I'm not sure Marcus's men aren't already there." Christian nodded once, then turned to Emily. "You're not coming. You'll stay here with Ava." She shook her head immediately. "No, this is my father's truth, my story." "I'm coming." "Emily, if you stop me, I'll go alone." He looked at her for a long moment, seeing the same fire in her eyes that once lived in him. But hers burned not to destroy, but to heal. He sighed. "Fine, but you'll stay by my side. One step away, and I'll drag you back myself." The gray SUV sliced through the damp morning air. The city was waking its streets glistening with rain. Brooklyn appeared on the horizon like an old ghost, familiar, worn full of buried secrets. The Red Hook storage facility loomed behind a steel fence disguised as an abandoned factory. But Christian spotted the truth immediately. Infrared sensors, 2 armed guards at the front. "They don't know we're here, but we can't use the main gate." Emily's fingers tightened on the seat. "Then how west drainage tunnel?" "You've been here before, haven't you?" Christian gave a brief, humorless smile. "I designed the security system for this place." They slipped through the alley, crawling into the old drainage pipe beneath the fence. The air was damp and metallic, echoing with the faint water drip. Christian moved first, sure-footed, every step precise. Emily followed close behind, her heartbeat loud in her ears. When they reached the control room, the screens were glowing, the server humming faintly. Christian plugged in the decryption device. "Accessing butterfly node, 87% complete." Emily's breath hitched. "Are you sure this is safe?" "No," he said flatly. "But doing the right thing rarely is." The moment he finished speaking, the alarm blared. Steel doors slammed open behind them. 2 men in black suits burst in with guns drawn. Christian reacted instantly. He pulled Emily down, a bullet grazing her cheek. He fired back, sharp and deadly. Both men fell before they could reload. "Move," he barked, pulling her to her feet. But then a voice came from the corridor that froze the air itself. "Marcus Wellington." He stepped out of the shadows, rain dripping from his golden hair, a smug calm in his ice-blue eyes. "Well?" Marcus drawled, the runaway bride and her tragic savior. "What a poetic reunion." Christian aimed his gun, his tone glacial. "Step aside, Marcus. I'm done with your theatrics." "I'm sure. But before you shoot, perhaps the lady deserves to hear one last truth." Marcus's lips curved. "Your father didn't die because of me, Emily. He died because of him. The world seemed to stop." What are you talking about?" she whispered. "Your father discovered Project Haven and planned to expose it." "But the man sent to silence him wasn't me, it was Christian's father." She turned to Christian, her face drained of color. "No, that's not true." Christian didn't answer. "Oh, it's true," Marcus said softly, savoring the moment. "His father was a technical consultant on Haven. He didn't pull the trigger, but he signed the clearance for the shipment, the one that exploded and killed both men." Emily stepped back, eyes wide with disbelief. "You knew?" Christian nodded slowly. "I did, but I didn't know you were his daughter until it was too late." "Too late?" Her voice broke. "You came to me to make peace with your guilt, didn't you?" Christian opened his mouth, but Marcus cut in, laughing bitterly. "No, Emily. He came to you because you had what he needed, the butterfly node. He used your heart to unlock it, just like I once did." The computer beeped. "Access complete." The final data flashed on screen, a list of offshore accounts incriminating contracts, and one photo Edward Wellington shaking hands with Lewis Security Group. Christian's stomach dropped. Marcus had told a half-truth, and the rest was enough to destroy him. "Emily," he began, stepping forward, but she backed away, tears spilling. "You told me to trust you. You said you'd protect me. And all this time, it all began with your father's signature." "No," he shouted, desperate. "My father didn't know when he found out he tried to stop Wellington, he was killed for it." The air between them crackled with grief and disbelief. Marcus smiled coldly, raising his gun. "Touching. But this is over. The data belongs to me." Before he could fire, Christian lunged. The gun went off the bullet, tearing into Christian's shoulder, but he didn't stop. He slammed Marcus to the ground. They fought fiercely, grappling in the narrow space. Emily screamed, trying to pull Christian back, but Marcus kicked her away and aimed his gun straight at her. "Adios, art teacher." The gunshot echoed, but it wasn't Marcus who fired. He froze, eyes wide, staring down at the blood blooming across his chest. Behind him stood Ava, her gun still smoking. "I hate men who talk too much." Marcus collapsed lifeless. His cold blue eyes still filled with spite. Christian fell beside Emily, blood seeping through his shirt. "You're hurt," she cried. "It's just a graze," he gasped. "We have to get the data out. Now." She looked down at Marcus's still body, then back at Christian. The truth had shattered everything she thought she knew, but one truth remained unbroken. She loved him, even if he was the son of the man whose choices had taken her father's life. On the ride back, Christian slumped against the seat, breathing shallow. Blood stained the bandage along his arm. Emily held his hand tightly, her voice trembling. "Don't close your eyes. Do you hear me? You owe me the rest of the story." He gave a faint smile. "Then I'll live, as long as you stay." "Idiot," she whispered, tears spilling over. "I'm not going anywhere." Wind swept through her hair as their car crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, carrying warmth and fear. Below, the river shimmered like black glass, reflecting fractured light. Emily stared out the window, watching the city blur into a palette of gray and gold. Somewhere in her memory, butterflies still fluttered across painted skies. And she understood to reach the dawn, they would have to survive one more night. A night where the line between love and betrayal, forgiveness and guilt, was as fragile as a butterfly's wing in the rain. The private hospital deep in northern Manhattan glowed in a sterile white light. The rhythmic beeping of heart monitors blended with the soft shuffle of nurses' footsteps. Outside, snow began to fall, thin, gentle, but relentless. Emily Hernandez sat beside the bed, her hands clasped tightly over the blanket covering Christian Lewis's still body. The wound in his shoulder had been stitched, but his face was pale, his lips cracked and dry. The doctor said he would live, if there were no complications. She hadn't left the room in 2 days. No phone, no news. Just the sound of his breathing and the endless hum of machines. Sometimes Christian would stir awake, his voice barely a whisper. "Is the data still safe?" Each time Emily would grip his hand. "Yes, I have it." He'd close his eyes again, as though that single reassurance was enough to let him endure the pain. On the third day, Ava appeared. She wore her black leather coat, and her steps were light but decisive. "He's still alive." "Yes, but barely conscious." "Good, because we've got a problem." Emily looked up sharply. What kind of problem? Ava dropped a file on the table. "The Wellington Group has filed charges against you. They're accusing you of embezzlement and money laundering through the Children's Future Fund. The media's already eating it up." Emily froze. "That's impossible. I never touched that account." "I know, but legally you're the fund's official owner. They've got your digital signature, your banking records, everything." "I never signed anything." "I believe you," Ava said calmly. "But they don't need the truth. They need time to erase it." She sighed and handed over another envelope. "And this is worse." Inside was a photo Emily and Christian leaving the Red Hook warehouse. His shoulder drenched in blood, the smoking ruins of Marcus Wellington's body behind them. A headline across the corner read, "Lovers on the run, suspected in murder case." Emily's knees nearly gave out. "They're not just trying to kill us," she whispered. "They're trying to bury who we are." Ava shrugged, her expression cold but pitying. "That's the Wellington way. Destroy reputations first, then lives." "What do we do now?" Ava said we should wait for him to wake up, nodding toward the bed. "If I knew Christian Lewis, he has a backup plan. He always does." That night, snow thickened outside the window. Emily fell asleep with her head resting on the bed, exhaustion pulling her under. She dreamed of a field filled with white butterflies fluttering around her. When she reached out to touch them, they turned to ash. She woke with a start. The lamp by the bedside glowed dimly, and Christian's eyes were open. "You're awake." she whispered, tears instantly blurring her vision. He smiled faintly, his voice hoarse. If I died, who would look after you? She laughed through her tears, hitting his arm lightly. Don't joke like that, you scared me. He lifted a trembling hand and brushed her cheek. You don't have to be afraid. I still have work to finish. Wellington isn't dead yet. Marcus is gone, Christian. You don't have to. He shook his head. Not Marcus. Edward, he's still out there, and he won't stop until he gets the data back. You're in their crosshairs now. I know, she said softly. But I'm not leaving you. He stared at her for a long moment before whispering. You should know. I once promised my father I wouldn't let the truth kill anyone else. And you broke that promise. Yes, he breathed, because I met you. His gaze pierced her raw and unguarded. In the sterile glow of the hospital, their silence became a confession, the kind that both redeems and destroys. The next morning, Ava returned with a hard drive in hand. Christian, you owe me. I recovered a partial backup of the butterfly node from the satellite system. Wellington's cleanup team didn't erase it in time. Christian pushed himself upright, pale but sharp-eyed. And the rest? There's one locked file. We couldn't crack it. It's labeled E47, a personal encryption. He frowned. For Edward? Emily's pulse quickened. What do you think it is? Something my father encrypted before he died? Ava plugged in the drive. The screen lit up with a warning, access restricted biometric key, required Lewis or Hernandez bloodline. They exchanged a stunned glance. Christian turned to her. Our blood. You mean both of us can open it? Yes, my father must have foreseen this. One day he knew I'd have to choose to protect our name or reveal the truth. And he made sure I'd be the one to help you choose, she murmured, her voice trembling. Christian nodded slowly. Because he knew I could only do the right thing if someone reminded me what good still looked like. They confirmed the access. The screen flickered to life. A grainy video appeared, Edward Wellington and Dominic Lewis, Christian's father, seated across a dimly lit table. Edward's voice rang clear. Project Haven isn't just a weapon. It's the future of global control. With it, every government bends to our will. Dominic's tone was weary, heavy with dread. You're leading the world into another war, Edward. No, I'm preventing one by making people fear it. I'm done. I won't be part of this. You don't have that choice. The screen went dark. Then a line of text appeared. To whoever finds this end, what we began in sin. Emily's throat tightened. Christian's eyes glistened, his voice barely audible. My father knew everything. He chose death over silence. And I'll finish what he started the right way. He swiveled to the terminal and began uploading the file. I'll release this to the international media. Once it's out, Wellington can't hide anymore. If you do that, they'll kill you. Maybe, but at least you'll be free to lose you, she burst out, her voice breaking. You think everything ends with sacrifice, Christian? But I don't want that to be our ending. He reached for her hand, pressing it to his lips. If I regret anything, it's dragging you into this war. I walked in alone, she said softly, because I chose to believe in you. Their eyes met heavy with everything they couldn't say. By noon, the snow had stopped. The city shimmered beneath a weak winter sun. Christian finalized the upload plan. The footage would be sent to 3 international outlets with a failsafe. If he didn't cancel it within 24 hours, the data would automatically go public. Ava watched him and shook her head. You're really going through with this? There's no other way. You never leave yourself an escape. He smiled faintly. I only need one her. Ava glanced at Emily and sighed. Love makes men reckless. No, Christian said quietly. It makes them honest. By evening, they left the hospital. The air was biting cold, the streets gleaming under frost. Christian wore a dark coat, his injured arm hidden beneath the fabric. Their car rolled toward the International Media Center. But halfway there, Christian noticed something in the rearview mirror, a black sedan following too closely. Hold on, he warned. They've found us. Gunfire erupted. Glass shattered. Emily screamed. Christian swerved sharply, turning into a narrow alley. Tires screeched. Sirens wailed in the distance. He slammed the brakes beneath an old bridge, pulling her into a maintenance bay. "They'll corner us soon," Ava's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Reinforcements need 10 minutes. 10 minutes is too long," Christian growled. Emily clutched the USB, her hands trembling. "They want this. Please take it. You'll be safe." "No." He turned sharply, fire in his eyes. "Without you, nothing means anything." Footsteps echoed overhead. Christian pulled her close, pressing her against the cold steel wall, both of them breathing hard. A bullet tore through the panel, grazing her shoulder. She gasped. He spun around, shielding her with his body and returning fire. A figure dropped. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice frantic. "You think I'm that fragile?" She managed to laugh, even as her lips trembled. He didn't answer, held her tighter, his breath rough against her ear. "If we survive this," he whispered, "I want to know if miracles exist." Miracles. Yes, that someone like me could still be loved. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered back, "You don't need a miracle, Christian. You need to believe you deserve one." Sirens wailed in the distance. Red lights flashed through the falling snow. Ava arrived with tactical units wiping out the attackers. Christian led Emily out, their clothes soaked and speckled with blood, their steps unsteady but alive. Ava hurried toward them. "The data's out. Dominic Lewis's video is everywhere. Edward Wellington was arrested at the airport." Christian let out a long breath, disbelief flickering in his eyes. "It's over." Emily shook her head gently. "No, it's only beginning." He looked at her, weary but smiling. "Beginning of what?" She smiled softly, eyes glimmering. "Of two people who aren't running anymore." That night, candlelight flickered softly in a small apartment overlooking the snowy edge of Central Park. Emily wrapped a bandage around his shoulder, her trembling fingers tender and slow. Christian sat still, watching her every move. "You still haven't forgiven me, have you?" "No," she said quietly. "But I don't need to. Forgiveness is for the past. I want to live in the present." He bowed his head, pressing a kiss to her hand. "Then, let me live in your present." She met his gaze, and the distance between them dissolved. Outside, the snow had stopped. For a fleeting moment, it seemed as though the white butterflies, the ones long gone, had returned fluttering in the candlelight. And Emily knew then that love didn't have to be pure between breath and confession, between the past and the now. It just had to be real. As for Christian, he finally understood that what he'd been searching for wasn't redemption for the Lewis name, but a reason to live again, a heart that could still love even after being broken beyond repair. That morning, dawn arrived late over Manhattan. The light was dim and hesitant, as if the sun couldn't decide to shine on a new beginning, or let the night swallow everything whole. In the small apartment beside Central Park's Emily Hernandez woke to the faint scent of coffee and the lingering warmth on the couch. Christian stood by the window, his shoulder wrapped in white bandages, the top buttons of his shirt undone. The early light spilled over him, soft, almost tender, and for a fleeting moment, it was hard to believe that this man had brought down an empire. She sat up quietly. "You haven't slept, have you?" He turned, the silver gray of his eyes carrying an unfamiliar calm. "Couldn't. When you're here, I'm afraid this might disappear if I close my eyes." She smiled gently. "You make it sound like we're dreaming." "Maybe we are. I never thought I'd live to see the day Wellington was arrested." Christian walked closer and sat beside her. Silence filled the room, only the soft ticking of the clock, marking time's fragile rhythm. "You know," he murmured, "I thought I'd feel relieved when my father's video went public. But I didn't. I just felt empty. For example, I no longer know who I am when the goal disappears." "Then be the Christian I know," Emily said softly. "Not the avenger, not the hero, just a man who once made me coffee at 3 a.m. and forgot the sugar." He chuckled. The sound was faint but full of warmth, a sound she'd never thought she'd hear from him. "You know," she continued, "I once thought I'd never love again after everything Wellington did. And then you appeared right when I'd stopped believing in anyone. What scared me most was how easily I believed in you." Christian didn't respond. He looked at her for a long time, as if memorizing every line of her face. "You don't know, Emily. he said quietly. What I fear most isn't dying. It's losing that faith you have in me. Her eyes glistened. Then don't make me regret it. That day, the news exploded. Edward Wellington's arrest dominated every channel. The trial was broadcast live. To the world, it was justice. But Emily knew that every victory carried a price in the world of those who had walked through darkness. That afternoon, Ava arrived still in her black leather coat, her face unreadable, though her tone had softened. You two are trending everywhere. The couple who exposed the crime of the century. Christian arched a brow. Sounds like a bad movie title. Maybe, but it works. You're the heroes now, Emily the brave whistleblower. Christian the mysterious insider. I never liked the spotlight. Ava shrugged. Then get used to it because there's something else. She dropped an envelope on the table. Inside was a document Wellington Group, reconstruction plan. A new investment group is buying up the remaining shares. They're backed by a company called Arcus Industries. The temporary legal representative on file? Ava paused, glancing at Emily. Is you? Emily froze. What? Your name's in the system as the lawful successor. Apparently, Edward Wellington transferred his shares before the arrest, leaving everything to the one with matching genetic markers. Christian frowned. Meaning, I checked, Ava said flatly. Emily has a distant blood connection to the Wellington family through her mother, a cousin of Edward's late wife. Silence fell over the room. Emily's hands tightened. So, I'm related to him. Christian's voice dropped low and cold. Edward always played long games. He wanted to keep Wellington in the family, even from prison. But I don't want anything from him. It's not about what you want, Ava said. Legally, you now control a corporation that once owned half the government. And trust me, people will come for that power. That evening, Emily went out alone. She needed air. The city was the same loud indifferent, as if no one had just risked their life for the truth. She walked through the park snow, settling on her coat. Christian spotted her sitting on a bench from a distance, staring at the frozen lake. He approached quietly and handed her a cup of hot coffee. You disappeared without a word. I thought you were running again. No, just trying to remember who I am. You're the woman I love. She turned to him. His face was soft in the pale light, equal parts gentle and weary. Christian, I don't care if your name is Wellington or Hernandez. You're the person who made me believe that even broken people can still choose the light. She smiled through her tears. And what if I say I don't want that power? I want to vanish somewhere, teach art to children, and live a quiet life. Then I'll go with you. She blinked, stunned. You mean that I've lost everything chasing justice? Now I want to keep the one thing that makes me human. They sat in silence as the wind carried the scent of coffee through the cold air. Christian, she whispered. Do you ever think justice lies? He looked at her curiously. What do you mean justice punishes the guilty? But it also takes men like your father, like mine. Maybe dawn isn't light at all. Perhaps it's just how the night hides its scars. Christian thought for a moment, then nodded. You may be right, but if dawn lies, at least it makes us believe morning exists. She smiled faintly and rested her head on his shoulder. You always sound like a philosopher. No, he murmured, just a man in love. A week later, the court officially recognized Emily as the temporary owner of Wellington Group. News spread fast. They called her the unwilling heiress. That night, Christian took her to an old building, once the headquarters of Wellington Group. Why here? She asked. Because if you want to erase what Wellington was, you have to start where it all began. The hallways were dim and dusty. On the wall still hung a tarnished plaque, Wellington Group, for a stronger tomorrow. Emily ran her fingers across the faded letters. My father once walked these halls as an employee, and now I walk them as an heir. Christian said fate has a cruel sense of humor taking her hand. But this time you get to write the ending. She looked at him and saw something new in his eyes, no longer the haunted man she met months ago, but someone learning how to live again. If I start over, she whispered, will you stay? Always. January. The sky above New York turned crystal blue after the snow melted. The Wellington Group became the Hernandez Foundation, no more weapons or money laundering. Only art education and rebuilding lives. During the public launch, Emily stood at the podium. Christian sat in the front row, his gaze steady on her. Her voice trembled, but never faltered. "I'm not a hero. I'm simply the daughter of a man who believed truth deserved to be heard. And today, I think that more than ever." Applause filled the room. Camera flashes painted the air in white light, capturing the image of a woman who had once been hunted, now standing tall as a symbol of hope. Christian smiled faintly. Inside, something in him melted the rage, the fear all dissolving into the simple sight of the woman who had saved him without ever meaning to. That night, back in their apartment, the city glowed beneath them. Emily sat by the window, a glass of red wine in hand, staring at the skyline. Christian draped his coat around her shoulders. "Cold, gnome. Just not used to peace yet." "You will be," he said softly. "Peace has its own sound." "What sound?" "The heartbeat of the person you love." She chuckled, set her glass down, and leaned against his chest. His heartbeat thudded slow and strong under her ear. "You know, Christian," she whispered, "if Dawn lies, I'll still believe it, because its lie brought me you." He held her close, his lips brushing her hair. "And it gave me a reason to live." Outside, dawn began again, not to erase the night, but to witness two people who had survived it, not in blinding light, but in the quiet warmth of love. Across the street, Ava leaned against her car, watching the soft glow from their window. She smiled faintly and spoke into her earpiece. "It's done. They deserve their new beginning." A voice replied, "And you." Ava looked up at the sky where streaks of pink touched the last of the gray. "I haven't found someone who makes me believe in dawn yet." She started the engine and disappeared into the waking city. Back in the apartment, Christian kissed Emily's hair and whispered words he had never dared to say aloud. "You're the only truth I've ever wanted to believe in." And that morning, when Dawn learned to lie, they chose to believe anyway. Because sometimes love is the only way humans can forgive the world. Spring came slowly to New York. The bare trees lining Central Park were beginning to show a blush of pale green. Melting snow left the scent of damp earth and the softness of new grass. Morning light filtered through the window, spilling across Emily Hernandez's fair skin as she stirred. Beside her, Christian Lewis was still asleep. His face was peaceful for once. Strands of dark hair fell over his forehead, and among them a few thin silver threads caught the light. Emily smiled, not the fragile smile of someone who fears losing what she loves, but the quiet smile of a woman who finally knows that even if the storms return, she will not face them alone. She stepped onto the balcony, where the first spring breeze whispered through the air, carrying the distant chime of church bells. Below, the city moved as it always did, people rushing, laughing, loving, betraying, yet the world had changed forever for Emily. 3 months had passed since the Wellington Group had fallen. Edward Wellington had been sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. The network of money laundering and arms trafficking was exposed and dismantled. And Emily, once the hunted victim, had become a symbol that truth can rise again. But she was no longer the face of the movement. After the final press conference, she quietly stepped down, handing the Hernandez Foundation to a team of professionals. She chose to return to painting. That afternoon, Christian took her to a small art studio in Soho. Canvases lined the walls, soft strokes of gray and pale gold blending like fading memories. "I didn't think you'd go back to painting this soon," he said, a note of surprise in his voice. "I used to paint to escape reality," she answered softly, brushing her fingers across the frame of an unfinished canvas. "Now I paint to remember it, to remind myself that we survived." Christian's gaze settled on a half-finished piece, 2 butterflies circling a lavender bloom. "Butterflies again," he murmured. "You've never forgotten that symbol, have you?" Emily smiled faintly, because it was where everything began. "My father said, when the butterflies stop flying, it's time to learn to open your wings." I think I finally understand what he meant. He said nothing, only rested a hand on her shoulder, a silent gesture of understanding deeper than words. That night, they walked through the park together. The snow had melted, though the chill lingered in the air. Emily wore a thin wool sweater. Christian wrapped a scarf around her neck, the movement so natural it felt like he'd done it all his life. "Ava called me this morning," he said. "She's leaving New York and planning to open a private security firm in London. Ava. Emily laughed softly. I still don't understand why someone like her agreed to work with you. Christian shrugged. She owed my father a life, and I owe her my faith. Strange, Emily murmured. Everyone around you seems to owe someone something. And you, I owe no one. She smiled, threading her fingers through his. I want to give. He tightened his grip, his eyes warm. He was no longer consumed by vengeance, only a man learning to trust in tomorrow because she was in it. The next day, Emily visited her father's grave, a quiet place in the northern outskirts, where the wind whispered through rows of oaks. She placed a fresh lavender sprig and a miniature painting, 2 white butterflies before the headstone. Dad, she whispered. I did it. Not for revenge, but for justice. Thank you for leaving me that painting. It showed me where to begin. A hand rested gently on her shoulder. Christian stood behind her, silent. He'd be proud of you, he said softly. And your father, she asked. He looked at the sky where white clouds drifted lazily between branches. I think he'd forgive me. Not because I avenged him, but because I finally learned how to stop hating. Emily smiled through misted eyes. So we both found peace in our own way. No, he replied quietly, voice low and steady. We found it in each other. In early April, Emily accepted an invitation to teach art at an elementary school in Queens, a special class for orphans. The room glowed with golden light, laughter echoing as bright paint splattered across the tables. Miss Emily, drawing butterflies is too hard, one curly-haired girl complained. Emily knelt beside her, guiding her small hand. It's not hard at all. Just draw 2 upside-down hearts and connect them with a thin line. See, a butterfly is just a heart that's learned to fly. The girl squealed with delight. From the doorway, Christian watched quietly, his expression soft, almost reverent. He didn't interrupt. He stood there watching the woman he loved, who had taught him that there is still room for gentleness, even in the darkest worlds. When class ended, the children ran to hug Emily. One little boy whispered, Miss Emily, that man keeps staring at you. Emily laughed and glanced at Christian. He only shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. That night, they returned to their apartment. The city shimmered beyond the window, its lights rippling over the surface of the park's lake. Emily sat by the window, studying her latest spring after the storm painting. On a pale blue sky, a storm was fading. At the center, 2 white butterflies soared between budding trees. Christian stood behind her, placing a hand on her shoulder. That painting, is it about us? Partly, and the other part, for those who are gone but left us a reason to keep living. He leaned down and kissed the top of her head. You know, he said the first time I saw you standing in that gray coat at Martin Holdings, I thought this woman will change my world. And you were right, she smiled. You changed me too, made me brave enough to face the past without fear. And you made me believe that the past isn't a sentence. They held each other's gaze, the rest of the world fading away. A few days later, Christian received an envelope with no sender. Inside was an old photograph, his father, Dominic Lewis, shaking hands with Edward Wellington. Beneath it, a handwritten note read, Not everything your father said was a lie. Christian stared at it for a long moment, then smiled faintly. Perhaps it was fate's reminder that no one is purely guilty or innocent. Everyone carries light and shadow. The only thing that matters is which side we believe in. He placed the photo in a box along with 2 plane tickets to Rome. We're going somewhere, he said when Emily entered. Not to run to begin again. She looked at him, her eyes gleaming like the spring sunlight. Is that your way of saying you love me? He chuckled. And your way of agreeing to come with me is saying you forgive me. She shook her head, smiling. Not forgiveness. Choice. I choose to stay. A week later, they left New York. The plane rose through clouds, leaving behind the city that had witnessed their blood and tears, now only a memory. In Rome, the sun poured gold over Piazza Navona. A violin played somewhere nearby. Emily sketched the scene. Christian sat beside her reading a newspaper, glancing at her occasionally. You don't get bored just sitting there? She asked without looking up. No, I worry you'll finish that sketch and forget to look at me. She laughed playfully, swatting his arm. You're a hopeless romantic. Yet you still love me. Yes. Because you're the most real thing in a world built on lies. He smiled, leaning closer to brush a kiss against her cheek as light as a butterfly's wing. That evening, they walked along the Tiber River. The golden streetlights shimmered across the water. Christian stopped and looked at her. Emily, do you ever think that after everything, we deserve to be happy? Her voice was soft like a breeze. Happiness isn't a reward, Christian. It's a choice. Then you choose me. Every day, no matter how the world changes. He smiled and pulled her into his arms. There, beneath the Roman sky, two people who had walked through hell finally found their heaven, not in grandeur or escape, but in the quiet rhythm of shared breath and gentle touch. A year later, the Hernandez Foundation opened its first European branch. Emily's painting, Spring After the Storm, was displayed in the New York Art Museum with a small inscription in the corner. For those who dare to love after the storm. Visitors often lingered before the canvas drawn, not by its technique, but by something more profound. A light that seemed to come from within, the kind of light born only from those who have learned to love despite the world. That evening in Tuscany, Christian and Emily stood on the balcony of their villa, watching the sun set over endless vineyards. The air smelled of lavender and wine. Look, she said, pointing upward. Two butterflies. Christian squinted, smiling. No, those are leaves. She said softly that they're butterflies because they're flying together. He took her hand, squeezing gently. Then we're butterflies too. She tilted her head, eyes shimmering. Yes, the kind that learned how to fly through storms. They smiled, then kissed, not the desperate kind born of fear, but one of quiet affirmation. That love, even after devastation, can return pure and whole. And under the blazing Italian sky, spring finally arrived, not just for the earth, but for two souls who once thought they had lost the light forever. Morning in Tuscany possessed a beauty that defied description. The sunlight was gentle, not blinding it, brushed lightly across thin clouds before spilling onto rows of grapevines still veiled in dew. In the distance, olive fields stretched endlessly, dotted with small houses, topped with bright red tiles. The stillness of it all made one forget the meaning of time itself, leaving only breath, heartbeat, and the quiet presence of the one you love. Emily sat in the villa's art room, a blank canvas before her glowing softly in the early light. Her brush moved slowly, painting fine breath-like strokes, the morning sun, the shadowed hills, and a solitary figure standing amid the vineyards. Tall, steady, his dark hair bent slightly toward the light. That man, Christian Lewis, was speaking on the phone out on the balcony, his voice low and firm. He was no longer the man entangled in hidden deals and power struggles. Now he was the founder of the Lewis Foundation for Urban Renewal, an organization he had built from the ashes of the fallen Wellington Group. Emily watched him, her gaze tender, yet knowing. She understood that though Christian no longer wore the armor of power he still carried within him, the instinct to protect only now what he protected was not status or dominance, but people, justice, and the children born into darkness who deserved to see the light. She set down her brush and walked out onto the terrace. He turned, and that rare private smile appeared, the kind reserved only for her. "You're up early," Christian said, his voice still rough from sleep. "I couldn't sleep," Emily replied, leaning against the railing. "Every time I hear the church bells in the distance, I think of New York. But not on the nights we were running. I think of the first time you took my hand in the rain." Christian chuckled softly. Setting his coffee cup aside, he slipped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I remember. But now I want us to think of it as where everything began, not as a scar. Some wounds don't have to heal," she murmured. "We need to learn to see them as part of our identity." He didn't reply, only held her closer. Their breaths intertwined, light as the mist of morning. That afternoon they had a visitor. Roberto, once Christian's right hand in New York, now the executive director of the Lewis Foundation. He looked older, but his eyes were still sharp and calm. Mr. Lewis, Ms. Hernandez, and Roberto were greeted with a warm smile. "Good news, the Brooklyn Riverside redevelopment project has been approved. The city officially handed the management rights to our foundation." Christian nodded slightly. "Good. Make sure every contract is transparent." "There's no room for shadows anymore." "Yes, sir." Roberto turned to Emily, his tone softening. Ms. Hernandez, the design you submitted for the Community Art Center impressed the council. They said they've never seen a plan that's so practical and full of soul. Emily blushed faintly. Thank you. I just wanted it to be a place where people could find faith again through art, the way I found myself. Roberto's weathered eyes gleamed with respect. You've made me believe that beauty itself can redeem a lost soul. After he left, Christian sat at the long wooden table gazing out across the vineyard. After a while, he spoke quietly. Sometimes I think, if I hadn't met you that day in Manhattan, I might have chosen a different path. One without light. And yet you found your way toward it, Emily said, sitting across from him. But doesn't every light come from darkness first? He looked up, his gray eyes carrying a warmth she hadn't seen before. You're right. Still, I fear that light could fade. It won't, Christian, she said gently, placing her hand over his. It only fades when we stop believing. Silence fell. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window, gilding their joined hands. Two people once forsaken by the world, now glowing in the quiet gold of redemption. That evening, Emily opened an old wooden box filled with her father's letters. Among them was one she had never opened. The paper yellowed, the ink faded by years. She unfolded it carefully. Inside were only a few trembling lines. My dearest Emily, I'm probably gone if you're reading this. But don't be afraid. Beyond numbers and power, there is love. If one day you meet someone who trusts you when the world doesn't hold on to him, that's how you'll know you've found home. She clutched the letter, tears falling silently. Christian stepped closer, took the paper from her hand and scanned it. He knew everything he said softly. My father always believed in goodness, even after being betrayed. Just like you. No, she whispered, eyes shimmering. I learned that. From you. He smiled faintly and brushed away her tears with his thumb. I never thought I could make anyone believe in anything, not after what I'd done. Not in you, she said quietly, but in love. And the idea that people can change. He bent down and kissed her forehead, more eloquent than 1,000 words. A week later, they flew back to New York for the opening of the Riverside Art Center. The city seemed reborn. New buildings had risen where the old Wellington Towers once stood. Crowds filled the harbor, laughter and music blending with the sound of waves. On stage, Emily stood beside Christian in a pale blue dress. When she spoke, her voice carried over the sea breeze. I used to fear this city, its streets, lights, and memories. But I realized it wasn't the city that darkened. It was we who let the shadows grow. I know that seeing this place alive again, the light never left. It was only waiting for us to open our eyes. Applause thundered. Some people wiped tears from their eyes. Christian looked at her with quiet pride. After the ceremony, they walked along the pier. The scent of salt mingled with the distant hum of music. Emily leaned her head against his shoulder. See that, Christian? The sea looks bluer today. It's not the sea, it's you. You're happy. Maybe both, she smiled. They stood in silence, listening to the soft rhythm of the tide. That night, Christian couldn't sleep. He stepped onto the balcony, gazing at the Manhattan lights in the distance. Emily followed, draping a blanket over his shoulders. Thinking again, she teased softly. Yeah, I was just wondering. If Marcus had never appeared in your life, if you hadn't run away from that church, would we have ever met? She paused before answering. Sometimes destiny doesn't come to save us. It comes to test if we're brave enough to change. Without that day, you might still be the Christian of the shadows, and I'd still be the art teacher afraid to dream. But because of the storm, we learned the worth of calm. He turned to her. So, no regrets. Not one. He smiled, the rare kind that reached his eyes. Neither do I. Then he kissed her, not hurriedly, not with passion's urgency, but slowly, completely, as though he wanted to remember every breath, every heartbeat she gave him. The next morning, they left New York for Tuscany once more. As the plane crossed the Atlantic, Emily looked at the endless blue sky out the window. She opened her journal and wrote softly, "Every storm passes. But the storm isn't frightening if someone holds your hand through the rain." Christian leaned over to read, smiling. That sounds like a promise. Maybe it is. she said, smiling back a promise between two people who survived the night. He took her hand without another word. Another evening in Tuscany. Christian sat beneath a wisteria trellis, reading the newspaper, while Emily painted nearby. When the last rays of sunlight faded, she set down her brush and joined him. She said thoughtfully, "I've always believed each of us is an unfinished symphony, with high notes, low notes, and silence. But if someone listens long enough, they'll hear how every note becomes one." He folded the paper and looked at her. "And you're the melody I never dared to write. But you did eventually. Because I met you." The breeze from the vineyard carried the scent of lavender. They fell silent, letting the sunset paint the sky gold, time pausing in that perfect instant where love was no longer a longing but a presence. Night fell. Christian quietly opened the window of their room. On the table sat a finished painting, the Symphony of Light. It depicted a dawn breaking over a field of purple flowers where two butterflies rose toward the sunlight. He traced the small inscription in Emily's handwriting at the corner. For Christian, the man who turned storms into dawn. He looked at it for a long moment, then whispered, "No, Emily. You were the dawn." Outside, the spring wind brushed gently against the shutters. They sat together in the silver glow of moonlight. No words promises warmth, and the quiet rhythm of two hearts beating. They didn't need forever. They didn't need to be heard. Because some loves don't need noise to last forever. Morning in Tuscany still looked like a dream that refused to wake. The sky was pale blue, and mist hovered lazily over the rolling vineyards stretching toward the horizon. In the gentle breeze, birds sang harmoniously with the faint scent of lavender drifting through the open window. Emily stirred, reaching for the space beside her empty. Christian was gone. She sat up, the silk sheet slipping over her shoulders, and turned toward the balcony. There he was, standing still. White shirt unbuttoned at the collar, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand, a man carved in quiet grace framed by the serenity of dawn. She walked out and leaned her head against his shoulder. "When did you wake up?" he said with a faint smile when the sun was still deciding whether to rise. "You always talk like you're writing a novel, and you," he turned to her, his eyes soft and tender, "are the reason every word I write makes sense." Emily chuckled, her heart swelling with that strange, fragile peace, the kind that comes after too much pain. A part of her still couldn't believe their story could end in a morning this gentle, no gunshots, no threats, only wind and light. Today was a special day. The Lewis Foundation was inaugurating the Emily Hernandez Art Center, a project designed by Emily herself, now bearing her name. She had objected to the idea, but Christian had insisted. "Your name isn't just about art," he said. "It's about courage. I want every child who walks through those doors to know you can survive. You can love, even when the world has tried to drown you." In the end, she agreed. She chose a simple cream dress, elegant yet understated. When she stepped out of the room, Christian was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, in a perfectly tailored navy suit, tie loosely knotted. The look in his eyes was the same as when he saw her awe, as though she were the only thing in focus in a blurred world. "You're going to make me forget my speech?" he teased, half smiling. "You don't need a speech," she whispered. "You have to stand there." They looked at each other, and words became unnecessary. The ceremony occurred in downtown Florence at a former warehouse transformed into a glass-walled art center filled with sunlight. A giant mural titled Butterfly Garden hung on the main wall, painted by Emily herself, the same butterfly motif that had followed their story from the beginning. When she stepped on stage, hundreds of guests filled the hall, politicians, artists, students, and even the children she had once taught in Queens. The lights shone on her, catching the quiet strength in her smile and the shimmer in her eyes. "I once believed I was born to endure," she began, her voice trembling slightly but steady. "But sometimes people enter our lives not to change us, but to remind us that we were never weak. I ran away from a wedding, lies, and a life that wasn't mine, only to find a path longer, harder, but far more real." The hall fell silent. She went on. "If there's one thing I've learned, pain doesn't make you broken, it makes you deeper. And sometimes the light you've been searching for doesn't come from others. It comes from the courage within yourself." Her gaze drifted toward the front row, where Christian watched her pride glowing in his eyes. "So thank you," she said, smiling through the shimmer of tears. To the one who taught me that lesson. And to life for giving me a second chance to begin again. Applause erupted like waves. Some cried, some smiled, but all were moved. When the crowd dispersed, Christian and Emily lingered in the empty hall. The afternoon light slanted through the glass walls, illuminating the mural behind them. The butterflies seemed to move as the colors caught the sun. "Do you remember when you first painted this?" he asked. "I do. My hands were shaking. I was terrified someone would find me. And now you're standing in the light." She turned her smile soft. "Because someone held my hand when it was still raining." He chuckled, the kind of laugh that warmed rather than echoed. "I have something for you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box, not a ring this time, a silver key engraved with a butterfly at its tip. "What's this for?" she asked. "A villa in Venice. I bought it last month by the Grand Canal. I thought, maybe we had a place to call home, not just a place to rest." Her breath caught. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think happiness meant finding someone perfect. But now I know real happiness is when two imperfect people choose to walk through the wreckage together. And you chose me. Not just once," she whispered, eyes glimmering. "I choose you every day." He took her hand, and in the golden light of the hall, they kissed a kiss no longer born of desperation, but of peace hard-earned. The next afternoon, they drove along the Italian coast. The Amalfi Cliffs curved like brushstrokes between sea and sky. The sunlight shimmered over the waves, and pastel houses clung to the hillsides like pieces of a dream. They stopped by a seaside cliff. Wind swept through Emily's hair as she stood near the edge, arms open. Christian asked, "If you could make one wish, what would it be?" She turned, smiling. "I wouldn't wish for anything. I'm already living it. And me, I'd wish that we never lose this faith no matter how time changes." She stepped closer, resting her forehead against his. "Faith isn't something we keep, Christian. It's something we plant little by little, every day with love." He smiled, and in that golden light their eyes reflected the vast, clear, and calm sky. That night in their seaside villa, Christian played the piano. Emily sat by the window sketching him by candlelight. The melody was imperfect, a few missed notes and pauses, but somehow it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever heard. "What's it called?" she asked softly. "Second Dawn." "Second Dawn, because I believe every life deserves another sunrise, if we dare to love again." She set her pencil down and kissed his shoulder. "And I'm the reason you wrote it?" "No," he murmured. "You are the music." Her laughter mingled with tears. The melody carried on weaving with the whisper of the waves and the rhythm of their hearts. The next morning, Emily woke early. Christian was outside trimming lavender sprigs, his hair tousled by the wind. He turned when he saw her, his eyes lighting up. "What are you doing with those, sending them to the kids in New York?" "Roberto said they still talk about Miss Emily. Lavender helps them sleep." She smiled, eyes glistening. "They remind me why I still choose to do what I love, no matter how cruel life once was." He came closer, taking her hand. "We both got lost once, Emily. What matters is that we found each other." She rested her head against his chest, feeling his slow, steady, warm heartbeat. "Christian, if the world changes again someday, if the storm returns, would you be afraid?" "No," he whispered, "because I know after every storm there's you." That evening they climbed the hill overlooking the sea. The wind carried the scent of salt and sunflowers, the last light of day spilling across their shoulders. Emily set up her easel on the hilltop while Christian sat quietly beside her. She painted slowly, each stroke deliberate, as if every line carried a memory. When it was done, she stepped back on the canvas. A sunrise over the ocean, two figures standing hand in hand beneath the first light of day. "What's it called?" he asked. "Where the Second Dawn begins." "Like my song." "Because we're writing the same story." He rose, pulled her close, and kissed her forehead. "I love you, Emily Hernandez. And I love you, Christian Lewis. Always." They stood together as the sun slipped below the horizon, leaving streaks of gold and rose behind. It was an ordinary moment, yet they both knew it was the actual ending of their story, not with tears, but with peace. Later that night, in the soft glow of candles, Emily wrote the final lines in her journal. "If someone asked me what love is, it's when you don't need to run anymore, because at last you've found where you belong." She closed the book, glancing at Christian, asleep beside her, his face serene in the candlelight. Outside, the sea whispered, and a white butterfly drifted through the open window, as if the world had come to bless them. And maybe that's what love truly is. Not a perfect ending, but the courage to begin again. Wherever you are reading this, if you've ever been broken, betrayed, or lost, remember this: your second dawn is waiting. You have to believe you deserve to see it. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel and share your thoughts below. Every comment is a spark that helps future stories come alive and reach more hearts.